I'd been driving all day through Oregon, trying to make it from Portland down to Eureka, California, where my brother was getting married. It was supposed to be a 7-hour trip, but thanks to construction and my tendency to wander off the main route to explore old logging roads or diners that looked like they hadn't changed since 1957, it was already past 11 p.m. and I was still 2 hours out. My phone lost signal somewhere outside Coos Bay, and the rain was starting to come down harder than it had all week. I wasn't worried, I knew the coast, and I'd taken this drive before, but I was tired, and my eyes felt like sandpaper. I figured I'd pull into a rest stop, sleep for a couple hours, and finish the drive in the morning. I spotted a green sign that said, Shorepine Rest Area, 2 miles, and breathed a little sigh of relief. I don't usually like sleeping at rest stops, too many weirdos, too few security cameras. But this one was out in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by trees, and it looked quiet enough. When I pulled in, there was only one other car, a white Chevy Impala with a cracked rear window and no license plate. It was parked crooked, nose in toward the edge of the lot, facing the tree line. Lights off. Windows fogged. I didn't see anyone inside. I parked a few spaces away, locked my doors, cracked the window an inch, and shut my eyes. I don't know what woke me, maybe a sound, maybe just the wrong kind of silence, but sometime later, I opened my eyes and felt something was off. It was dead quiet. Not even the rain tapping on the roof. And that car, the Impala, it was gone. But I hadn't heard it leave. No engine, no tires on wet gravel. Just, gone. I sat up, rubbed my eyes, and checked the time. It was 2:36 a.m. My breath fogged in the air. It was cold. I turned the key to auxiliary and clicked on the dome light for a second, just to look around. That's when I saw the footprints. On the window. Not outside. Inside. Bare footprints. Damp, smeared slightly. Like someone had been standing on the dashboard, pressing their feet against the glass, looking out. I turned on the headlights in a panic. Nothing in front of me. Nothing in the mirrors. I twisted around and checked the back seat. Empty. I got out, heart hammering, and swept the flashlight from my glove box across the interior. No one. No signs of forced entry. Just, those footprints. I wiped them off with a towel and convinced myself I must have somehow fogged it up weirdly and imagined them. Yeah. Maybe it was from my shoes earlier, climbing in when it was wet out. Sure. I was too shaken to sleep again, so I backed out slowly and got back on the road. 20 minutes later, I passed a sign, Shorepine Rest Area, 2 miles. Wait. No. That wasn't possible. I hadn't turned around. I'd been heading south. I knew I had. But there it was again, the same green sign, the same slight bend in the road, the same shape of trees along the shoulder. I thought maybe I was overtired and hallucinating. I'd heard of that happening on long drives. I passed the turnoff without slowing down. Another 30 minutes. Still no signal. Still dark, still raining. Then I saw it again. Shorepine Rest Area, 2 miles. I slowed down. My stomach turned cold. There were no loops in this road. No turnoffs that could have brought me back here. And yet, there it was. I took the exit, needing to see if it really was the same rest stop. It was. Same layout. Same broken vending machine. Same security sign that had the Y in security scratched out. Except now there were 2 cars. Mine. And the Impala. Parked exactly where it had been earlier. I didn't stop. I just drove straight through, back onto the highway, and kept driving, heart pounding like a war drum. I drove for hours. Didn't stop. Didn't blink. And just as dawn started to break, I finally got a signal again. My phone exploded with texts and missed calls. I was about to call my brother when the road twisted around a bend, and there it was. Shorepine Rest Area, 2 miles. I slammed on the brakes. Sat there for a full minute, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles went white. I didn't take the exit. I just kept going. Only I didn't go anywhere. Because a few minutes later, my headlights caught the shape of that same damn sign again. Shorepine Rest Area, 2 miles. And this time, the Impala was parked on the shoulder, facing the wrong direction, halfway hidden in the trees. Like it was waiting. I swerved around it and floored it. No more thinking. No more trying to rationalize. I just needed out. Around 7 a.m., I saw a gas station. One I recognized. I nearly cried. I pulled in, stumbled out of the car, and went inside. The clerk, a college kid, maybe 20, gave me a look. "Dude, you okay? You look like hell." I told him what happened, in a rush, barely coherent. When I said, "Shorepine Rest Area," he froze. "What did you say?" "Shorepine," I said. "That's where it happened. Near Coos Bay." He shook his head slowly. "That place doesn't exist anymore." I blinked. "What?" "It burned down 5 years ago. Some kind of freak fire. Whole area was condemned. They took the signs down and everything." I insisted I'd just seen it. Just parked there. Just walked around it. There were cars, vending machines, footprints on my windshield. But he was already pulling up an article on his phone. "Massive fire destroys remote rest stop, investigators baffled." There was a photo. The same layout. Same trees. Same security sign with the broken Y. But in the photo, in the ashes, was a melted Chevy Impala. They never found a driver. Only footprints, burned into the concrete, leading from the car to the bathrooms, and never coming back out. I stayed at a hotel that night. Slept with the lights on, the curtains drawn, and a chair braced against the door. I don't know what I saw. I don't know what followed me. But I sold the car a week later, moved back to Portland, and haven't driven south since. Sometimes, though, I still get texts with no number. Just a location pin. Shorepine Rest Area. And the message: "You left me behind." This happened last August. I've been meaning to post about it for a while, but honestly, I still don't understand what happened. Maybe someone here can help me make sense of it. For context, I, 28M, was moving from California to Utah. I'd gotten a new job in Salt Lake City and decided to make the drive solo. My plan was to take a scenic detour through Nevada via Highway 93 instead of sticking to the major interstates. I've done a few long drives before and I like weird roadside stops, alien motels, dinosaur parks, ghost towns. That kind of thing. Anyway, I left Tonopah around 10 a.m. with the goal of reaching Ely by sunset. It's mostly just desert out there, big stretches of nothing but sand, brush, and the occasional rusting sign. I filled up before I left and figured I'd be fine. There's a town called Pioche along the way that I planned to stop in for a bathroom and snacks. But then something weird happened. About an hour and a half into the drive, I passed a little gas station on the side of the highway. Totally old school, 1 building, 2 pumps, a faded sign that said Baxter's Fuel and Fix. No other cars. No people. Just sitting there like a relic from 1985. The glass door was open, swaying a little in the wind. I thought about stopping but I had enough gas, so I just kept going. Maybe 45 minutes later, I saw it again. Same angle. Same broken sign. Same sun-faded Coke machine outside the store. This time, I did stop. I figured I must have turned around by mistake or something. But my GPS still said I was on 93 north. No wrong turns. I pulled into the gravel lot. It was dead silent. No insects. No birds. No wind. The place looked frozen. Like it hadn't been touched in decades. I peeked inside. Empty shelves. A few plastic wrappers on the floor. An old fan in the corner, unmoving. I called out. Hello? Nothing. Then I heard a soft click. Like a camera shutter. But when I turned, no one was there. I got this crawling feeling in my spine like I wasn't supposed to be there. So I got back in the car and drove off, chalking it up to an abandoned station and my brain playing tricks. 30 minutes later, I swear to God, I passed Baxter's again. At that point I laughed out loud. Not because it was funny, but because I was starting to feel genuinely scared. I slowed down and took pictures this time. Same place. Same broken pump. Same goddamn Coke machine. I even took a photo of the GPS on my phone. Still said I was on 93 north. Still said I was 45 miles from Pioche. I kept driving. Watching mile markers. Counting them. But they didn't make sense. Mile marker 144, then 146, then back to 144 again. And at 5:42 p.m., nearly 6 hours after I left Tonopah, I passed Baxter's again. Only this time, there was a car out front. A black Buick. Old. From the 70s or early 80s. Its driver's door was open, and one of the pumps was dangling from the tank. I slowed. My headlights flicked on automatically, it was getting dark. I pulled over across the road and grabbed my phone, thinking maybe I'd call the police or ask the driver if they were okay. That's when I saw the figure. Someone, tall, wearing denim, was standing inside the store, just barely visible through the cracked window. They weren't moving. Just staring. Watching me. I waved. They didn't wave back. They lifted their hand and pointed behind me. I turned, heart pounding, and saw nothing. Just open desert and the empty highway. When I looked back at the window, the figure was gone. At that point I lost it. I didn't care how much gas I had left. I floored it. I kept the pedal down until I saw another vehicle, a pickup truck, coming from the opposite direction. I flashed my lights and waved them down like a lunatic. The driver rolled down his window. Guy looked confused but friendly enough. I asked if he'd seen a gas station back the way I came. He said the last real stop was in Caliente, 100 miles behind me. I asked about Baxter's. He shook his head. Said he'd driven this stretch for years and never heard of it. He must have seen how shaken I was because he offered to drive behind me to the next town. We convoyed the rest of the way to Pioche. I told him the whole thing over burgers at a diner. He said something I'll never forget. You know, locals around here say this highway, it folds sometimes. Like a sheet of paper. You think you're going straight, but you're not. Something else is moving with you. I laughed and said it sounded like an urban legend. But then he asked to see my phone. I unlocked it and handed it to him. He swiped through the photos. Scrolled and scrolled. Then looked at me. There were no photos of Baxter's. Not a single one. Not the station. Not the GPS. Not the guy in the window. Nothing. Only a blurry shot of my dashboard from hours earlier. I checked my phone myself. Checked my deleted photos. My cloud. Nothing. I even Googled Baxter's Fuel and Fix, Nevada, later. There's no record of it. It's been almost a year. I still have the receipt from that diner in Pioche. That's the only proof I made it out. But sometimes, when I'm driving alone and glance in the mirror, I swear I see a black Buick following me. And I don't stop anymore. No matter what. I've put this off for almost 2 years. My girlfriend says I should talk about it, so here goes. Maybe someone out there can explain what the hell happened to us in August 2022. My friend David and I, both 31M at the time, were on a 2-week road trip across the country. We were doing the Great American Loop, more or less, California to the Carolinas, then swinging up to New England and cutting back through the Midwest. We were on a tight budget, so we camped when we could and used cheap motels the rest of the time. If a town wasn't on Google Maps, we weren't going to stop. Until Jericho. We were heading north out of Oklahoma, toward Kansas. It was early evening, around 7:30 p.m., and we were trying to make it to Wichita before dark. But a storm was rolling in, big clouds like dirty bruises, wind pushing dust across the road. GPS rerouted us because of a wreck on the highway and sent us onto a state road I didn't recognize. Route 281, I think. After about 20 minutes, we saw signs for a place called Jericho. Neither of us had heard of it. No population listed on the sign. Just, "Welcome to Jericho, EST 1890. We were running low on gas, and we figured we could at least top off, grab a snack, maybe wait out the storm. Jericho was weird. The main street looked frozen in time. All brick buildings, faded paint, boarded windows. Like someone had built a movie set for Depression-era Dust Bowl and just left it to rot. But the lights were on in a few places. Street lamps worked. We passed a diner that had a neon open sign, flickering but lit. There was a gas station called Coble's Fuel Stop, with 2 ancient pumps and a mechanical bell that rang when we pulled in. No card reader. Cash only. David went inside to pay, and I started filling up. That's when I noticed something: the air was off. Still and thick, like the whole town was under a glass dome. You could hear every tiny sound. My footsteps, the wind, bugs clicking in the grass. And it smelled like wet pennies. David came out with a weird look on his face. I asked what was up, and he said the cashier didn't say a single word to him. Just took the money, nodded, and stared. We laughed it off. Old town. Old people. Whatever. We decided to eat at the diner before getting back on the road. Big mistake. Inside the diner, everything felt wrong. It wasn't dirty, actually, it was too clean. Like a set that had never been used. A waitress in a blue dress brought us menus. Her name tag said Mabel in faded gold letters. Her smile was stiff, like she hadn't done it in a while. I asked what she recommended, and she just said, in a dry, rehearsed voice, "Meatloaf's fresh." So I got the meatloaf. David got eggs and toast. We were the only customers in there. Every time I looked at Mabel, she was already looking at me. Not in a friendly way. Just watching. When she brought the food, she stared at David's plate for a long time. Then said, "That's not what I'd choose." He laughed it off. I didn't. We ate fast. Food was bland but fine. No music. No noise except the tick of the ceiling fan and our silverware. When we left, the storm was on top of us. No way we'd make it to Wichita safely. There was one motel in town, the Traveler's Rest. $40 a night. The guy behind the desk gave me a key without asking for ID. Room 3. The room was like a time capsule, floral wallpaper, CRT TV, musty smell. But it was dry and the bed was soft, so whatever. David fell asleep fast. I stayed up reading for a bit. Around midnight, I heard something. Voices. At first I thought it was the TV in another room, but it was coming from outside. I peeked through the curtain. There were people standing in the street. A dozen of them. Maybe more. All just standing there, facing the motel. They weren't talking, exactly. More like murmuring. Like a church crowd reciting a prayer. I couldn't make out the words. I whispered to David. He came to the window, looked out, and went pale. "I think they're from the diner," he said. We turned off the lights and watched. After about 10 minutes, the people all turned at the same time, like birds flocking, and walked away. No cars. No talking. Just vanished into the dark. We didn't sleep after that. At dawn, we packed and left. Didn't even shower. When we got back on the highway, I looked for Jericho on the GPS. Nothing. No town listed. No exit number. No pin. Just a blank stretch of 281. I thought maybe we missed the sign. But we never passed anything. Just fields and road until we reached Wichita. That night, at the hotel, I Googled everything I could think of. Jericho, Oklahoma. Coble's Fuel Stop. Travelers Rest Motel, Oklahoma. Mabel Waitress Meatloaf. Nothing. I asked David if he remembered the name of the town. He said he didn't think it had a name. But I still have the receipt from the gas station. Crumpled in the bottom of my glove box. It says, "Thank you for visiting Jericho, see you soon." No address. No phone number. We didn't tell anyone else. Not until now. But sometimes I wake up at night with the sound of that bell in my head, the one that rang when we pulled in for gas. And in the dream, when I look out the motel window, they're still standing there. All of them. Facing my room. This happened in the summer of 2021, when I was 29. I've told this story to maybe 3 people in person. Every time I do, I feel like I'm making it up, but I swear on my life, it happened. And I'm hoping that writing it out might finally help me sleep again. I was driving from Washington State to Illinois with my cousin Nick. He'd just been discharged from the Air Force and wanted to spend some time seeing the country before job hunting. I'd recently been laid off and figured, hell, why not? Gas was still reasonable, and we had nothing but time. We loaded up my SUV, bought a tent, a few supplies, and hit the road with no real plan beyond east. The first week was perfect. Campfires. Starry nights. Cheap beer and dumb road signs. We drove through Idaho and down into Montana, sticking mostly to the scenic routes, state highways and forest roads. We avoided major cities and tried to camp at small, out-of-the-way spots. We were aiming for Glacier National Park next. That's when we saw him. It was about 4:30 in the afternoon, and we were on Route 200, just outside of Lincoln, Montana. Not much around. Trees, open road, and an occasional distant mountain. We'd been driving for hours, and the heat was starting to make us loopy. That's when Nick pointed and said, "You see that?" About 200 feet ahead, just off the shoulder, was a guy standing in the grass. Thumb out. Backpack on. We slowed down automatically. It's hard not to. He looked normal enough, late 30s or early 40s, short hair, jeans, flannel shirt. But what stood out to me most was that he was perfectly still. Not like fidgeting, not pacing. Just waiting. "Should we?" Nick asked. "Sure, why not?" I said. I'd picked up a hitchhiker once before in Oregon and it was uneventful. I pulled over. The man walked over, calm and deliberate, and opened the back door. "You heading east?" he asked. His voice was low but polite. "Yeah, toward Great Falls," Nick said. He smiled. "That'll do." He got in, set his pack on the floor behind me, and buckled up. That's when I saw his hands. They were wrapped in what looked like gauze bandages, stained a little yellow, like old paper. His fingernails poked out like little dark crescents. No one mentioned it. I turned back to the road. The first 20 minutes were silent. Nick and I made small talk about the route while the man just listened. Eventually, I asked, "Where you coming from?" He replied, "Nowhere you'd know." I laughed awkwardly. "Fair enough. What's your name?" There was a pause. "You can call me Eli." Nick nodded. "You camping out here?" Another long pause. "No. I'm looking for someone." The temperature in the car dropped, not literally, but it felt like it. A kind of hush settled over the cab. I turned on the music. Classic rock. Eli didn't react. After a while, I glanced at the rearview. He was staring directly at me. Eyes too wide. No blink. I looked away fast and turned up the AC. About 30 minutes later, Eli spoke again. "You lied to your girlfriend." My hands tightened on the wheel. "What?" I said. He repeated it. "You lied to your girlfriend. That night in Spokane. When you said you were just tired." I looked at Nick. He was staring at me, wide-eyed. That did happen. A week earlier. I'd been texting my girlfriend from the road and told her I was going to sleep early when I was actually drinking with Nick until 2 a.m. Nothing major, but I hadn't told anyone about that. Certainly not Eli. I laughed nervously. Lucky guess. Eli leaned forward. I could feel his breath on the side of my neck. "You also lied when you said you forgave her." That hit me like a fist. I pulled over. "I think this is your stop," I said, trying to keep my voice even. Eli smiled. It was so wide. His lips stretched almost ear to ear. Then he said something I will never forget. "She's pregnant, by the way." My stomach dropped. I hadn't spoken to her in days. She hadn't told me anything. But later, I swear to God, when I finally called her from a gas station in Great Falls, she told me she'd just found out that morning. There is no way Eli could have known. We drove the next 30 minutes in silence. Eli didn't speak again. When we passed a narrow gravel trail that forked off into the woods, he suddenly said, "Here." "What?" Nick asked. "This is where I get off." I looked. No buildings. No signs. Just trees and dust. "You sure?" He smiled again. "You've been kind." He stepped out, grabbed his pack, and walked down the path without looking back. I waited until he disappeared into the tree line. Then I floored it. For the next 100 miles, neither of us said anything. Finally, Nick turned to me. "You heard what he said to me, right?" "What?" Nick looked pale. He told me my mom died in her sleep last night." I stared at him. His mom lived in Ohio. Totally healthy. We both thought he was joking. But when we got to a motel in Bismarck the next night, there were 10 missed calls on his phone. His sister. His mom died in her sleep. Stroke. Exactly as Eli had said. We both went home early after that. I flew back to Seattle from Minneapolis. Nick went straight to Ohio. We don't talk about the trip. But sometimes, late at night, I think about Eli. And I remember the last thing he said, right before disappearing into the woods. He looked at me and said, in that calm, low voice, "We always find the broken ones." Edit. Since posting this, I've gotten a few DMs asking for more details. I want to clarify a few things. No, I never saw Eli again. But Nick says he sometimes sees someone standing at the edge of his backyard at night. He lives in a suburb. There's no reason anyone should be back there. I've scoured missing person reports, forums, and even weird Montana Reddit threads. No one matches the description. No bandaged hands. No Eli. One person said something that stuck with me. You didn't pick him up. He picked you. If you've seen someone like this, or experienced anything similar, I want to hear from you. But please, whatever you do, don't offer rides to people with bandaged hands. This all started on day 5 of our trip across the Southwest. There were 3 of us, me, Dylan, my friend Marcy, and my younger cousin Leo. We were doing one of those digital detox things, no social media, no streaming, no GPS. Just maps, walkie-talkies, and good old-fashioned AM/FM radio. We thought we were being cute. Retro. Minimalist. Now we know better. There are some things that need to be filtered. Some signals you're not supposed to hear. We were driving across New Mexico, somewhere east of Gallup and just north of I-40. We decided to avoid the freeway and take a smaller route that curved through the desert. I was driving, Leo was navigating, and Marcy was in charge of music. Except we didn't have any downloaded, and reception was garbage. So we flipped on the radio. Static. More static. Faint mariachi music. Evangelical preacher. More static. Then, clear as glass. You're listening to station 119.1, Whisper FM. Broadcasting from just beneath the surface. We all looked at each other. Marcy laughed. Creepy. Leo tuned it more carefully. It came in perfectly. No static at all. The air is warm tonight. Dry and humming. Stay with us. We'll take care of everything. Soft ambient music fades in. Chimes. A woman's voice humming. We listened for about an hour. No ads. No news. Just fragments of poetry, static bursts, weird overlapping whispers. Occasionally, the DJ would come back on. You've been listening a long time. That's good. Stay with us. Don't look away. We should have turned it off. But we didn't. That night, we camped at a spot near El Malpais. No cell signal, no lights, no people for miles. Perfect, we thought. We set up the tent, made food, and tried to listen to the radio again. No signal. Not even static. But at exactly 1:19 a.m., my walkie-talkie buzzed. Click. You're listening to Whisper FM. I dropped it. Marcy laughed nervously. Leo grabbed his own, turned it off, turned it on again. Dead. Mine buzzed again. Don't leave. The next morning, we laughed it off. Maybe a prank, or someone on the same channel. We drove north, toward Santa Fe. Around 11 a.m., Marcy turned the radio back on out of boredom. Whisper FM came through instantly. This next one's for you, Marcy. It's time to remember. Then a track played that sounded exactly like a song her dad used to hum when she was little. Not a commercial song. Not a real one. Just something he made up. She turned it off and didn't speak for half an hour. By nightfall, the station was all we could get, on every dial. AM, FM, even the emergency band. Same voice. Same music. Only now, it was getting personal. Leo. You're thinking about the tunnel, aren't you? The one you never told anyone about. You didn't tell Dylan. You didn't tell your therapist. But we know. Faint sound of dripping water. Echo. Breathing. Leo screamed and threw the radio out the window. It was back on when we woke up. Things got worse the closer we got to Colorado. Signs started changing. A green road sign read, 119 miles to Stillness. We checked the map. Nothing called Stillness anywhere in New Mexico or Colorado. Billboards glitched, flickering LED displays, even analog ones. One said, "Turn back, Dylan. This frequency is not for you." I tried to ignore it. But I'd been dreaming in whispers for days. And now the radio was talking to me. "Do you remember what you did in high school? Behind the bleachers?" "We do." That was the first lie. This is the last road. Music, a distorted version of the school fight song from my hometown. Played backward. Marcy snapped. She tried to smash the dashboard controls. Pulled the fuse. Disconnected the stereo. It didn't matter. The audio kept playing through the engine itself. You could hear it when the car idled. When we turned off the ignition, it just whispered through the air vents. We reached a gas station outside of Trinidad, Colorado. A real place, finally. Civilization. We ran inside, panicked, exhausted, desperate for some normalcy. It was bright. Clean. A kid working the counter. Everything felt real. Until the overhead radio kicked on. "We're so glad you made it. Just one more mile." Sound of footsteps on gravel. A door opening. The kid froze. "Yo," he said, eyes wide. "That's not the store radio." We asked him if he could hear it. He nodded. "I just turned on the stereo. It's supposed to be country." Leo tried to ask if he'd heard of Whisper FM before. The kid said, slowly, "Only once. My brother heard it. After he came back from the war. He didn't last long after that. We stayed in a motel that night. 3 separate rooms. I still don't know what happened to the others in theirs. But I'll tell you what happened in mine. At 1:19 a.m., the lights flickered. The alarm clock went blank. Then a voice came from inside the walls. "You're the only one still resisting, Dylan. Why? You know it's better if you give in. Everyone who listens long enough comes home eventually." The walls pulsed. The bed dipped like something was climbing into it. I left the room and slept in the car. When I woke up, it was 5 p.m. the next day. I tried calling Marcy. No answer. Leo's door was open. His bed unslept. Their things were gone. I drove for 2 days straight, until I hit Kansas City. The radio still played Whisper FM all the way. But when I crossed the state line, the signal cut out. I turned the dial. Nothing. Just silence. That was 3 months ago. I've tried to find them. No social media. No phone records. Their credit cards haven't been used. I posted on message boards. I emailed paranormal groups. Nobody had heard of Whisper FM. Until last week. That's when I got the envelope. No return address. Inside was a cassette tape. Labeled only. Broadcast 119.1. I found a player and listened. It was them. Marcy. Leo. Talking. Laughing. Begging. And then, a voice. They've joined the broadcast. They're safe. They've let go. Now, every night at 1:19 a.m., my radio turns on by itself. Doesn't matter if I unplug it. Doesn't matter if I leave the house. It plays. Welcome back, Dylan. You're almost ready. Edit. It's happening again. I drove to another state. Bought a new car. New phone. Checked into a hotel with no electronics. But when I flipped on the bedside lamp, it flickered. And the bulb buzzed in rhythm. not static. Words. Like whispers in Morse code. I translated them. They say, tune in. Stay still. Stay still. Stay still. Please. If anyone's heard of Whisper FM, if anyone knows what this is, tell me how to make it stop. Because I think I know what they mean by stillness. And I think I'm already there. I don't know how to say this without sounding like I'm crazy or making stuff up. But this happened to me, and I'm still trying to process it. I've been holding it in for months because I didn't want anyone else to worry or think I was paranoid. But I'm done pretending it was normal. I'm a nanny. That's my job, watching kids, making sure they're safe, feeding them, taking them to school, doing homework, etc. I've been doing it for about 5 years now, mostly for middle-class families with typical issues, working parents, messy kids, the usual. Until this last family. Let's call them the Wilsons. I got the job through an agency. The interview was fine, the parents seemed nice, Tom and Ellen Wilson, mid-40s, 2 kids, Emily, 7, and Noah, 4. They lived in a suburban neighborhood that looked like a postcard, manicured lawns, kids riding bikes, friendly waves from neighbors. I started on a Monday morning in late October, right after the kids' Halloween party. The house was big, older but well kept, and it felt different. I can't explain it better than that, but it was like the kind of quiet that presses against your skin. I chalked it up to nerves, new job jitters. Emily and Noah were polite but reserved. Noah especially clung to his mom when I first arrived, eyes wide and suspicious. Emily was quieter than most 7-year-olds I've met. She didn't giggle much, didn't complain, just watched. The parents were clear about boundaries and expectations. We like things calm here, Ellen said. No wild games or yelling. Just gentle care. I thought that was fair. I was there to help, not be a babysitter who lets kids run wild. The first week was uneventful, if a little tense. The kids went to bed early, the house was spotless, and Tom and Ellen worked long hours. They always left a detailed schedule, meals, nap times, homework, TV shows allowed, everything. Then I noticed the windows. The Wilsons' house had these thick curtains that were always drawn except in the kitchen during the day. It was like they didn't want anyone to see inside, which is a bit unusual but not unheard of. What was weird was the backyard fence. It was so high and so tightly covered in dense ivy that you couldn't see a thing. The neighbors on either side had open fences and friendly yards, but the Wilsons had made theirs a fortress. One afternoon, Emily asked if she could play outside in the backyard. I agreed, and we went through the back door, which had a keypad lock. I didn't have the code, so Emily opened it herself. The backyard was strange. It was smaller than I expected, barely more than a narrow strip with a sandbox and a small garden. But the grass was patchy, and there were no toys other than the sandbox. Emily told me her dad didn't like too many things out there because it made it harder to keep track. I nodded, trying not to pry. That night, as I was cleaning up, I heard a noise outside the window in the living room. It was faint, a scraping or maybe a soft thump. I went to the window and pulled aside the curtain. Nothing. Just darkness and the outline of the fence. But then, across the street, I saw a figure standing just beyond a streetlight. It looked like a man in a coat, but he vanished into the shadows before I could blink. I shook it off. Probably someone walking a dog or a neighbor coming home late. The next few days, I began to notice little things that didn't make sense. Emily had bruises on her arms. When I asked her about them, she said she fell a lot. But the bruises were all in weird places, on her ribs, her thighs. She never cried, never complained, just let me clean and cover them up. Noah, the little boy, was even quieter than before. I'd try to get him to smile or say a word, but he just clung to his mom whenever she was home and refused to eat more than a few bites when I fed him. I started to get uneasy. One day, I stayed late to finish some laundry. I was folding Noah's clothes in his room when I noticed a small door in the corner, half hidden behind a bookshelf. I'd never seen it before. Curious, I tried to open it. It was locked. The door was tiny, maybe a crawlspace or a storage closet. I knocked softly, no answer. Then I heard a soft, muffled sound. It was like whispering, but I couldn't make out the words. My heart pounded. I decided to tell Ellen the next day. When I brought it up, Ellen looked startled, then angry. "There's no door in Noah's room," she said flatly. "You must be mistaken." I knew I wasn't. The next day, I asked Tom about it. He smiled tightly. "Noah's room doesn't have anything like that. Maybe you're seeing things from working too hard." I didn't argue. Weeks passed, and the house felt heavier. At night, I'd hear sounds, low sobbing, footsteps in the hall, doors creaking. I'd check every room. No one was there. One night, I heard a scream. It was so sharp and terrifying I almost dropped the dishes I was washing. I ran into the hall, heart racing, but no one was awake. The next morning, I mentioned it to Ellen. She said the kids had nightmares, but it was nothing unusual. I was starting to feel trapped, but the money was good, and I didn't want to quit without a backup plan. Then, one night after everyone was asleep, I heard the faint click of the keypad on the back door unlocking. I froze. Someone came in. I heard footsteps moving softly through the living room toward the kids' rooms. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, but there was no signal. The house must have thick walls blocking it. I moved quietly to the kitchen window, peered out, but couldn't see anyone. The footsteps stopped outside Noah's room. I held my breath. Noah started crying softly, and a low, harsh voice whispered something I couldn't make out. Suddenly, the footsteps moved away. I waited until I was sure no one was coming, then bolted to the front door. It was locked too, with no key nearby. Panicking, I grabbed the house phone and dialed 911. This time the call went through. I whispered the address and said there was someone in the house. The dispatcher said officers were on the way. Minutes later, I heard sirens and pounding on the front door. The police burst in and swept the house. No one was found. They searched every room, every closet, the attic, the basement. No one. The officers looked at me like I was crazy when I told them about the sounds, the bruises, the locked door in Noah's room. The kids were quiet as ever, Emily staring blankly at the ceiling, Noah clutching a stuffed bear, eyes wide with fear. The police advised me to leave for the night. I packed my things, and that night, I stayed at a hotel. The next day, the Wilsons fired me. They claimed I was disruptive and making things up. The agency apologized but said there was nothing more they could do. I tried to tell friends and family, but no one believed me. "Maybe the stress is getting to you," they said. "Maybe you're imagining things." But then I saw the news. The house next door to the Wilsons caught fire. The police found a woman chained in the basement, emaciated, terrified, with bruises and cuts all over her. She'd been missing for months. I didn't know what to think. The woman refused to talk, only trembling when questioned. The Wilsons moved away soon after. I quit nannying. I still think about those kids every day, about the bruises, the whispers, the door. I'm scared they're still in danger. I'm scared I wasn't there when they needed someone. I'm scared this kind of horror happens behind closed doors, in quiet neighborhoods, in houses that look normal. If you're reading this, please pay attention to the signs. Listen when kids say they're hurt. Don't ignore strange noises. Sometimes, the scariest monsters wear the mask of normalcy. I'm sharing this because it's the only way I can feel less alone. Because sometimes, the truth is worse than any ghost story. After the Wilsons moved out, the house stayed empty for a few weeks. The neighborhood was buzzing with rumors about the fire next door and the woman found chained in the basement. Everyone said they'd suspected something was off about that family, but no one had done anything. The news stories barely scratched the surface. I kept thinking about those kids, Emily and Noah. I couldn't stop picturing those bruises, the silent way they acted, and the locked door I found in Noah's room. I started calling the agency, asking if they had any updates about the Wilsons, any investigations, any official reports. They told me nothing had come up and warned me to avoid speculation, as if my concerns were just wild imagination. But something inside me refused to let go. One evening, I tried to visit the house. It was boarded up, the windows shuttered tight. The neighbors didn't want to talk. I pressed a woman walking her dog for details. She glanced around nervously before whispering, "The police came back a few nights ago. Said they found more chains in the basement. No one knows how many were locked up down there." I felt my stomach drop. The image of that woman chained in the basement was haunting enough, but now more chains? More victims? I wanted to believe the kids had been safe. But the way they acted told me otherwise. Emily's bruises weren't from falling. Noah's silence wasn't from shyness. Then the nightmares began. I'd wake up in cold sweats, hear footsteps in my apartment, see shadows dart just outside my window. It felt like they followed me, not just the Wilsons, but whatever evil lived in that house. I told my therapist about it. She suggested it was trauma, that I was experiencing PTSD from what I'd witnessed. Maybe that was true. But I also started digging. Late at night, I scoured public records, property registries, court documents, anything about the Wilsons. What I found was disturbing. Tom Wilson had a history of restraining orders, allegations of abuse from previous relationships that mysteriously got dropped or dismissed. Ellen Wilson had worked for years as a private nurse, which meant she had access to sedatives and drugs that could keep someone immobilized without obvious marks. Neighbors described seeing strange deliveries, heavy boxes, big black bags, coming and going at odd hours. The house next door to the Wilsons, the one that caught fire, had belonged to an elderly man who died suddenly. The house had been empty for almost a year before the Wilsons moved in. I started to piece it together. The Wilsons weren't just normal parents. They were predators hiding in plain sight, masking their violence with charm and control. That basement was their dark secret, a prison for whoever they kidnapped or abused. I couldn't shake the feeling that those kids were still trapped in some way. Maybe hidden away. Maybe moved. Maybe worse. I contacted Child Protective Services and the police again, armed with everything I'd gathered. This time, they opened a case and said they would investigate. But the wheels of the system turned slow, and months later, I still hadn't heard anything back. Meanwhile, my life unraveled. I couldn't work. I couldn't sleep. I kept looking over my shoulder, jumping at every noise. I moved apartments twice but felt the same creeping dread. I started getting calls from unknown numbers, silent calls that ended when I picked up. Sometimes, a knock at my door at night, no one there. Once, I found a small note slipped under my door that read, "Stop digging." I went to the police again. They filed a report, said they'd increase patrols, but I knew no one was really watching. Months later, Emily's and Noah's names popped up in a missing children's report. I almost broke down crying. Somehow, they'd vanished without a trace. The agency I worked for refused to comment, threatened legal action if I spoke publicly. But I couldn't stay silent. I started a blog, sharing my story, hoping someone would listen, hoping someone would come forward with information. One day, I got a message from a stranger. A woman named Laura who said she'd been a nanny for the Wilsons years ago, and she left suddenly after something happened. She warned me to be careful and said the Wilsons had friends in the police department who kept their secrets safe. I realized then how deep the rot went. My fear wasn't just about one family or one house. It was about a system that protects abusers, that silences victims, that lets monsters walk free. I still get panic attacks. I still see shadows in the dark. But I keep fighting. Because those kids, that woman in the basement, and every other victim deserve to be heard. If you're reading this and you're scared, trapped, or hurt, please reach out. There are people who want to help. You're not alone. If you think something is wrong, trust your gut. Sometimes, the scariest monsters don't hide in the dark, they live next door.